Well, there's a debate in Parliament that we really want to get into. This is a debate around whether or not Ghanaians who also hold citizenship of another country can hold certain public offices in Ghana. And that is a debate that has been happening for a while. The parties now agree that it should be amended, the constitution I mean, so that dual citizens can hold public offices in Ghana, except that, as we are beginning to learn, the committee that was tasked to look at this, they have recommended that their constitution be amended. But if you read the details in there, there's still a fair bit of individuals who still disagree with this. And this was now going to come to the floor of Parliament for a debate and possibly a vote. And so let's look at this, because this has monumental implications for our country. And this are the timelines as far as the consideration of this particular private members bill is concerned. It was just in June 2021 that the NPP MP, Kennedy Osei-Nyarko, proposed this particular bill. When he did so, it had to wait until October 2021, where we saw that that particular bill was then introduced to Parliament for consideration. And then the process continued to July 2022, where the Council of State considered it and returned with an advice that in essence says Parliament can proceed to consider it. Indeed, the Council of State endorsed it too, that proposal that was put in there by Kennedy Osei-Nyarko, the private members motion. Remember that that was a proposal to amend the constitution, and so they had to go through this particular process. And then we've now seen that as we speak currently, June, we're now noticing that the Legal Affairs Committee has recommended that it be passed. And so the House is going to be considering this and consider it will on the floor of Parliament. But there are key issues that we've seen in the committee's report when it comes to those who still object to it. One of the key issues they raise is the subject of loyalty. So these individuals that we are, well, Kennedy Osei-Nyarko, are those who believe in that cause, suggest that the constitution should be amended for, you're going to be allowing individuals who are not only Ghanaians, but also are citizens of other countries to hold sensitive positions, including the position of an IGP, for example. They say, how do you evaluate the subject of loyalty? Which of these two countries, if indeed they're dual citizens, will they be loyal to? And then there's a second argument that they've raised, and it's captured in the committee's report, about allegiance. So which country will they hold an allegiance to? So if we have an IGP who is a Ghanaian, but is also a citizen of the United Kingdom, for example, such a sensitive position, the argument is, so which of these two countries will he hold an allegiance to? Would he possibly be providing intelligence to the intelligence agencies in the United Kingdom because he also holds an allegiance to that country? Is a question that they've raised, and that is vehement also. And we're going to be interrogating it a bit more and looking at some of the issues. But the list of positions that currently dual citizens cannot hold is pretty extensive. Member of Parliament is one. If you want to be an ambassador or a high commissioner and you hold a dual citizenship, you cannot hold these two positions. Again, if you want to be a secretary to cabinet, it's impossible. If you want to be chief of defense staff, again, it's impossible because of the sensitive nature of that. And I've already mentioned the IGP's position, which is a very important one. But I want to bring this back. If this bill is carried, if members of Parliament pass this, as we're expecting that it may happen, because the two main parties have already expressed an opinion on this. And so you expect that the parties will whip their members of Parliament in line to have this passed. That's what we're expecting. But you can never tell. I mean, MPs sometimes can, for whatever reason, break ranks, especially if this comes down to a secret vote. And then we have the subject of the president and also the vice president. Again, this is an area where currently you cannot hold the position if you're a dual citizen. But again, in this particular proposed legislation, the amendment to the constitution, indeed, it is recommended that create a position that allows people with dual citizenship to also run for president and vice president's office. But the committee argued this out, and their recommendation is we should create an exception here. That yes, you may hold a position as an IGP if you are a dual citizen, but for president and the vice president, we should leave that untouched. You should reserve that for sole citizens, citizens who are only citizens of this great Republic of Ghana. I will put this particular proposal that has now been put before Parliament from the committee to the chief proponents of the dual citizens holding public office in Ghana. I'll put this to them and see where they stand on this, because the committee believes these two positions, the president and the vice president, we shouldn't touch it. But then some may also extend the argument. So if you don't want dual citizens to run as president and to be nominated and considered for the vice president's slot because you believe it's sensitive, why then do you then say that it's okay for them to be IGP, the chief of defense staff, and that have sensitive positions also? That's the argument that some have raised also in this. And so this is one that is an obvious one to consider. We'll look at that when we sit down for a conversation, especially as this goes to the plenary for consideration. But there are many other countries who now, as the evidence is growing, they don't make too much fuss of dual citizens holding public office in setting departments across their government architecture. America is one, Canada, France, even in West Africa, Nigeria, and Senegal. But the real point to consider, though, is we are okay taking monies and the remittance from our compatriots abroad to develop this country. And just look at the numbers. It's huge. Right now, the IMF, the World Bank, they look at this 25.6 billion. If you look at the period of 2018 to 2023, it's far more exponentially than anything you get from the IMF, right? And so just imagine the contribution you're making to this economy. And yet you say you want to disqualify them from holding positions. If they pump this much into the economy, then obviously they are loyal to this place. Why aren't they spending as much elsewhere? Because they have family ties here, their roots here. The survival and the development of this economy and this great country is also in their interest. And the evidence is in the numbers, 25.26 billion. And if you look at this over time, you begin to see how much they've contributed, averaging $4 billion a year since 2018. That should tell you something, that this, for those who support the amendment, say, should put the argument to rest. We'll see. And then you look at the subject of the sheer number of Ghanaians in the diaspora. Huge indeed. We've given them the right to vote, but we're depriving them from holding public office in Ghana. If you can vote for somebody, inherently, you should be able to put yourself out to be voted for, right? That's the argument that they've made. We'll interrogate that too. The president himself is on record to favor an amendment to the Constitution. In fact, he doesn't even want his own political party to, as you know, the Political Parties Act bars parties from giving certain positions out to people with dual citizens. And he doesn't want a party to even amend their own constitution to incorporate that in there. And that is why this process, for many people you speak to, even in Parliament and elsewhere, believe that we will end this year definitely before Parliament is dissolved with an amended constitution, because it's very, very important for us to have this. And then you look at the other benefits that we get if we do this, because we were talking about the year of return, and you're coming into Ghana, tourism, bringing money, but they're also going to bring us skills. We're also going to talk about essential development that is going to come. They go out there and they learn, they improve their skills, and we need that influx of qualified human resources in this country. Then, of course, the call then is Parliament should pass the bill. Will they? I guess we'll get into this, but why is this important now? I guess it's never been more important, considering where we are now, 4 months to an election. Parliament is going to be dissolved. If you don't fix this now, it has to start afresh. Okay, let's get into a conversation after this. And thanks for staying with us here on PM Express. And joining me for a conversation, Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare is obviously the president of the Dual Citizenship Rights Protection Society, but you know him as a fellow with the CDD, and he joins us with thoughts on this. He's been championing this indeed for years. I wonder what his comment is on where we are in the process. Yusuf Hussein is a former member of parliament for Tamale Central. Dr. Rashid Rahman is the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, and we'll be joined by Roxing Nelson Dafiamekbo, a member of the Constitutional Legal Affairs Committee in Parliament, or will also join us for a thought. But as you know, PMS is always brought to you by Syntax Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. It is also brought to you by the coverage of the Euros 2024. But as you know, I always recommend to you Syntax Tanks because it is the strongest tank out there, and they also have bespoke offerings for you. You can order any size, any color of preference you want. They have 7 years warranty. You want to call them on 0244 335 168 or shop online at syntaxgh.com. I want to start with you, Professor Stephen Kukwasari. You've seen the committee's report after many, many years of deliberations. That's the content there, the recommendation and the issues that it covered. Does it fairly represent what you've been fighting for?
Yes, absolutely. And let me start by saying this is a very important piece of legislation, not only because of what it seeks to do, as important as that is, but also because of the process that this has gone through. For the first time, we actually have a private member's bill to amend the Constitution. First time the Constitution was amended in 1996. It was not a private member's bill. So this is another progress. But in addition to a private member's bill, the bipartisanship surrounding the whole process provides a template of how we can unite to solve common problems that enhance the public good. And something like that doesn't happen by accident. You have to actually be aware of the process and give credit to some people who have worked very hard. And the first person I want to give credit to is the Speaker of Parliament. He's done a yeoman's job, not only in this private member initiative, but the way he's shepherded this bill. Then you have to give the Council of State a lot of credit because the Constitution gives them 30 days to advise Parliament when the bill is referred to the Council. The Council did a thorough job, completed its job in 30 days, and unanimously said, why are we even debating this? Let's do it. And then you have to give credit to the majority and the minority side and their leadership in working together. You have to give a lot of credit to ex-President Mahama, who has come out publicly and said, why are we in a situation where we want to exclude some of the skilled labor that this country has invested in? We shouldn't do that. We should tap into their skills, their knowledge, their wealth. So you have to give him a lot of credit. And as you mentioned, you have to give the president, the current president, too, credit, because he has said the same thing, that, look, we need these dual citizens on board. In fact, if we were strictly to interpret the Constitution as written, then our overseas diaspora cannot even have dual citizens as executive members. Then how are we going to operate these overseas branches? We think about extending the vote to them, ROPA. But you have to always ask the question, what does it mean to have a right to vote without the corollary right to be voted for? So I'm excited by this bill. And I know that you mentioned that they excluded the president and the vice president. Mm-hmm. That's important, because that is the nature of legislation. People have yes and others don't. You sit together, you negotiate, and so on. And so you say, okay, after all that, let's exclude the president and the vice president.
Are those fears founded, though? Are those fears founded to exclude the vice
At this
president?
point, that's not a question to ask. The question to ask and to think about is, look, these things are never zero-sum games where you get everything or you don't get anything. Sometimes it's good to get something. You must never let perfection stand in the way of doing something. And remember, people don't remember, but when the Constitution was promulgated, sometime in 1992, dual citizenship was not even allowed because people have the same fears that some of them are expressing now. Oh no, they are not loyal, they are this and that and that. So you had Article 8(1) of the 1992 Constitution saying, if you become a dual citizen, then automatically you give up your Ghanaian citizenship. It took 4 years and the first parliament to come and say, well, look, this thing that we are doing, we are overreacting. It's not such a bad thing. So let's amend the Constitution and allow dual citizenship. But let's exclude them from holding these specific offices. That was in 1996. So now, 2006, 2016, almost 30 years after, we are revisiting the thing and say, hey, look, when we allow them to join the party, the union, when we allow dual citizens to join, nothing has happened. They haven't betrayed the country. In 30 years, we've lived with them happily. So now let's relax these positions that we say we are not going to allow them to hold. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, that is how legislation and progress are made. Not everything has to be revolutionary. Many things are evolutionary, and that's important.
Okay.
And even as I speak, many people may not realize, but almost a month ago, the Supreme Court actually weighed in. There was other positions in the Citizenship Act, including the Supreme Court. Dual citizens were not allowed to go on the Supreme Court. They were not allowed to be commissioner of the GRA, Ghana Revenue Authority. They couldn't be commissioner of the prison service. They couldn't be chief fire officer. They couldn't be a director of the ministry. They couldn't be a colonel in the army. The Supreme Court said, no, look, the proper process was not followed. So now they can be all those things. And many people don't even know. And nothing has happened. And I guarantee you nothing will happen. Sometimes we let our imaginary fears drive us into doing something drastic. In my opinion, we should never speculate about someone's intention and based on that speculation, punish them because we suspect they may do something.
Stay with me, Professor Asare. Let me bring in my other panelists who are also joining me right now, Mr. Fuseni and Dr. Drima. Mr. Fuseni, you were in Parliament. This has been a conversation that you've had when you were ranking member on the Constitutional Legal Affairs Committee. When the committee considered this recently, before they proposed that the amendment should be passed, there's some members on the committee that still oppose this, and their concerns were still around the issues of loyalty and allegiance. Where do you stand on this tonight?
Well, thank you, Evans. I think that we need to comment Professor Azar because he's persevered in this fight. I mean, I remember having a series of meetings with him at the time that I was the ranking member of the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, together with my chairman, then Ben Abdallah Banda. We were left in no doubt that times have moved on, and it is important for us to look at the Constitution and the prohibitions that seem to bar some Ghanaians from taking up public offices after they have acquired the citizenship of another country. And I remember when the Office of the Special Prosecutor Act was being considered, I vociferously argued that we should not limit it to only Ghanaians, but would open it to other Ghanaians in the diaspora, precisely because of the experience and skills that they will bring on board in helping us deal with the canker of corruption. And so I think that it has been long in coming, but we are finally here. When I started reading the report, it didn't appear to me that they had done what I thought that they should do. But after the introduction, I saw that in the intent of the bill was to amend the Constitution, because the Constitution says that that should be clear. I mean, if you are intent on amending the Constitution, that should be clear in the preamble of the Act. So the processes that have been followed are legitimate, required by the Constitution.
Are the concerns around loyalty and allegiance still valid? It's still been expressed by members of Parliament.
The concerns around loyalty and allegiance will always be played out. I mean, and these were the times that the kings and sovereigns were those who held sway in countries, and so if a king perceived the person as not being loyal, that person will not occupy any of the king's positions. But now the loyalty is to the state and not to a particular person. And there is no demonstrable evidence that a person, natural born Ghanaian or otherwise, who has occupied a lesser position, a position that has been allowed by the Constitution, has betrayed the country. We've not yet seen that. There's no evidence, empirical evidence, pointing conclusively to the fact that some people who hold dual citizenship have betrayed the country in ways that will rule back.
On that question of betrayal, though, I mean, this amendment proposes that a dual citizen can be a secretary to cabinet. That's a very sensitive position indeed, considering the very sensitive conversations. And you've been a cabinet minister before, so you know this. Also, the chief of defense staff and the IGP, those are very sensitive positions. And that's where the issues about allegiance and loyalty and the questions about betrayal then come in. If you are making an exception for the president and the vice president, the president chairs the cabinet, and all the sensitive matters of state are discussed there, and you believe that position should be reserved for a sole Ghanaian, why are you putting in there a secretary to that cabinet and a minister, for example, who has a dual citizen? How do you address that if that is thrown at you, that question?
Evidence shows clearly that people who have betrayed their countries in terms of espionage are not those who hold dual citizenship. I mean, you can look at the evidence. People, natural-born citizens of a country who have risen to the highest positions and who have served in sensitive positions, who do not owe allegiance to any other country, have betrayed their country. So, but we have not yet seen a dual citizen betraying a country that, or his mother country, which has given him an opportunity to serve. So.
There may have been an interference in the line there. We'll see. We connect to him.
I mean, it's far-fetched. That person is more prone to betraying his country. I mean, there is no evidence that points to that. And I believe I have always said that as a developing country, we should not limit ourselves to only people in Ghana who should occupy some positions. Which positions need skill, which needs dexterity, which needs some level of competence, which competence can be gotten from the plethora of Ghanaians who are in the diaspora. And so I'm predisposed to, allowing for Ghanaians, natural born or otherwise, who have demonstrable competence in areas that can help develop this country to come in and assist. And there are also checks. I mean, if a person, either Ghanaian or non-Ghanaian, or who holds the citizenship of another country, betrays the country in ways that requires punishment, there are laws to deal with that.
And Dr. Rashid Rahman, to that point that he makes there about checks, and considering where we are in our development, is this long overdue or too early to make such a fundamental change to our constitution?
Evans, let me say a very good evening to my co-panelists and to you yourself. I think it's long overdue. And some of us have some personal interest in this because we have family who hold, dual citizenship and so on. So let me make that declaration before I go on to my my specific points that I want to raise. Maybe first of all, on the issue of the report itself, I think the report, has been very comprehensive. I think in terms of, the exceptions that have been made in the report for the president and the vice president, I think even in the US where Professor Asare is, there is some of that exception. If you are not born in America, for instance, you cannot be the president of the United States of America. So countries have some of these exceptions just to ensure that loyalty and allegiance is upheld at the highest level.
But isn't that a concern that those other committee level raise, for example, that if you have concerns around that, then why don't you extend it then to all the other sensitive positions?
Well, I think, Evans, you raise a very important point. It's one thing being a secretary to cabinet, but another thing being the president or the vice president. So for instance, when the national security advisors are briefing the president, sometimes even the vice president is not allowed to be present in those briefings. So there are different levels at which we can look at this. But I want to say, Evans, that this law is an archaic law, and over the years, it has denied our country of a lot of talent that is out there that could have contributed to the development of our country. And I want to pick up on one of the points that was made by Professor Asare regarding this serves as a template on which we can learn bipartisan cooperation and unity and so on. I think, Professor Asare, we are seeing this bipartisan cooperation and unity because both parties have been stung by this law. Both parties have suffered, and NDC is currently suffering in court. So on this matter, it looks like because both parties have suffered, we are seeing very quick bipartisan cooperation. I just hope that on other matters, we can see that kind of cooperation, but I doubt it, very much. For me, I think the biggest issue in this is, it borders on issues of inclusion and participation. The committee report raises a lot of issues about, the role of the diaspora economically, and so on. On the one hand, we want the diaspora to make contributions, and very recently, I think there were reports about how much our country is benefiting from the contributions of our compatriots who live abroad, and there were even arguments about the data and the statistics and so on. And then, in another breath, we say these people cannot participate in the political process. I think it's very unfair if you look at it from the point of view of participation and so on. I have seen countries where, for instance, very recently, the leader of opposition in Canada was a dual Canadian and American citizen. And that didn't prevent him, from performing his role and from being allegiant to the country. Sometimes when people want to betray their country, it doesn't simply mean that they do that because they are dual citizens. Currently, Senator Menendez in the US, I think he was charged today or yesterday for betraying his country. He's a senior senator in the US Congress. So if you look at the history, most people acquire this dual citizenship, not because of the fact that they don't love their country. We have all lived abroad, and the exigencies, the challenges, and so on, sometimes would make people try to acquire this citizenship. But I mean, the love for country would always be with these people. And so really, those fears, I believe, are unfounded. And I'm very happy that it has taken some time, but now we are at the point where this veil is being taken off. And hopefully we can benefit from the contributions of our
And indeed,
brothers and sisters.
now it's going to come to the floor, and that's where, of course, the members of parliament will have to vote. And I want to bring in Professor Kukwasari into the conversation. And this is something on the back of something that Dr. Rashid Rahman just said there about the political considerations that have conspired to get both parties to throw their weight behind this, considering that currently, as you know, the opposition party has a member of parliament who has been caught in the same web. The MPP also has a similar one in the past that we've seen its influence in this one also, and the way they interpret this. In your engagement and on this particular subject, have you found that this has played a part in the consensus building process?
No. I think let's give the MPs some credit. And as the Honorable Hussaini was saying, this is not a process that we started even in 2021. We started it as far back as 2017. That's the parliament, the 7th parliament. I was dealing with them on this same issue, and the question issue had not arisen at that time. Look, in 1996, when the law was, or the constitution was amended to allow dual citizenship, the parties had not had any problem with one of their own being bitten by the law. People, our parliamentarians, are aware of what is going on around the world. They understand globalization. They understand all these arguments that are well laid out in the report. And they are rational people. They have looked at all the facts and say, look, on one hand, there is this speculation that people are not going to be loyal. Why are they not going to be loyal? Nobody is able to point out, save that they say because you have another citizenship. It's almost like saying, because Stevie Wonder came to Ghana and Ghana conferred Ghanaian citizenship on him, therefore, somehow he's not going to be loyal to his mother country. I mean, it just doesn't make too much sense to me. Or for that matter, if we are playing soccer, which is very important to some people, and one person can actually make a difference compared to, let's say, a parliament of 275 people. If you have whatever weird ideas, you are 1 or 2 or 3, you are not in the majority. But on the soccer field, we are able to take a Ghanaian German to take a penalty against the German national team without worrying about their loyalty and their allegiance and so on. And the reason we should not be worried, and we are not worried, is that people are professionals. I am an attorney. If I'm hired by the United States and they are paying me money, it wouldn't matter that I'm from Ghana. I'm going to do a professional job. Similarly, if Ghana hired me against the United States, it doesn't matter if I'm a US citizen or not. I'm going to do a professional job. People are professionals in what they do. And merely because they are another citizen, or they have another citizen, or they have another religion, or they have another tribe, that does not come into their professional decision making. And that's something that we tend to ignore when we highlight this loyalty and allegiance. It's almost as if because of loyalty and allegiance, we are going to lose our professionalism and start doing something crazy. And Honorable Hussaini has mentioned, around the world, not just in Ghana, there's not a single instance of a dual citizen actually betraying the country. But when you come to Ghana, the only citizens that have been actually accused of betraying the country were mono citizens, Piesa and Co., during the Susidis exchange. And people don't realize, I hate to bring Nkrumah's name in the conversation because he has been in the news recently, but Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was a dual citizen. Not only was he a citizen of the United Kingdom, he was actually a citizen of Guinea, because they signed the Ghana-Guinea-Mali compact. And that's what allowed him to be a co-president when he moved to Guinea. And merely because he moved to Guinea and he was the co-president, that did not mean he was going to betray Guinea to Ghana. No, the world really doesn't work like that. And these things are just imagination. And that's why it's important that I laid out the evolution from all the fears that we had about even allowing dual citizenship. Then we allowed it 30 years, nothing has happened. It's time to let these imaginary fears go. And that's what I think is happening here. People have evidence that it doesn't really matter. It's not because of Jackie Kwesing or because of Adamu Sankedi. I don't think so at all.
And let me pick the thoughts of the politician with us on that matter. What's your comment on that? On the possible role politics might play in this and political considerations that may conspire to get both parties to support this?
Well, I agree entirely with Professor Azar. The world has moved on. Today we have a native Indian being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And no one in his right senses will say that Richard Sunak will betray the United Kingdom to India. You can't say that. Just this evening, I was watching the Spanish team, and I chanced on Nico Williams saying that he's a Ghanaian. So people are proud to be Ghanaians.
In fact, the Nico Williams one is even more fascinating because his brother plays for the Black Stars and he plays for the Spanish team. But they are so
exactly,
and if Ghana and Spain meet international, they will play very committed football on the field as professionals, determined to beat the other country.
Yes, it has happened even before in Ghana. Two brothers, one playing for Germany, the other playing for Ghana. It has happened before. You don't see any evidence, just fears that are unfounded, that appear to deprive a developing country like Ghana of the needed human resource to develop the country. And I think that the earlier we looked at that, the better. Even with the United States, that clearly has put the limitation on qualification to be president on natural-born Americans. They don't say that you must be an American, because who is an American? You must be born in America. And so you find Obama becoming president of America. You find Biden, who says, like, look, I'm native Irish, but he's the president of America. And so I think that the world has moved on. And I can give you many examples. Just recently, a black man was elected the Prime Minister of Scotland, I think. I mean, how do you think that could happen? If you held on to the old theory of sovereignty of nations, which brought about issues of allegiance and loyalty, then clearly that could not have happened. But you're looking for people to help develop the country, and you can stretch the argument. The argument can be stretched to the extent that, look, even if you have a president who has demonstrated loyalty, commitment, who has demonstrated a passion to work, he's going to work within the confines of the law.
Yeah, I mean, but you make that last point then. So why is the committee recommending that we make an exception for the president and the vice president?
Well, Azar has answered it in a beautiful way. I couldn't have said it much better. Things move in times. We started from a total ban, then came to the position of a partial ban, limited position that could not be occupied by persons holding dual citizenship to certain positions. Now we are moving towards removing the ban on those positions and limiting it to only the president and the vice president. Who knows? Who knows? As we go on, we might say, well, we don't need that provision in our constitution. We might need a Richard Sunak or a person who probably is not a native Ghanaian, but who has stayed in Ghana for a very long time, who has demonstrated his love and passion for the country and wants to see the development of the country, and then who we can trust to be in charge of the country. We are moving on.
I mean, we now have 4 months to the elections, and Parliament's, of course, life will expire January 7, before the inauguration of the president. I mean, this has to happen. Parliament consider and approve before all this plays out. I mean, and I want to bring in the Dr. Rashid Rahman into the conversation. You've already commented on the bipartisan support that this House already in the House, and the Speaker is obviously in favor of this. Do you expect that before Parliament possibly rises in the next 2 weeks, go on the recess and return for that final sitting before the resolution, that this indeed will be passed based on what you know?
I'm not too sure about the next 2 weeks, but I'm maybe hopeful that, when they come for the last meeting, hopefully this will be done, because at this point, whilst we commend the Right Honourable Speaker, I think he has done many things, and he needs to be commended, particularly given the kind of difficult parliament that he has had to manage. And I believe he's also very concerned about legacy. And this will be one important legacy that will be attributed to him. I mean, we hear, the growth of the private members bill and how he has shepherded this and expanded the frontiers. But I mean, the first credit goes to Right Honourable Speaker Michael Quay, who was the one who, tested the law, and the Right Honourable Speaker Bagbin came and took it from where he left and expanded it. And I believe this is one important legacy. Today I was in a program with Parliament, and we were talking about some of the legacy issues. And even though this was not one of it, I was telling his advisors that, look, you don't have a lot of time. The time that is left is not much. So if you have to act, you have to act with dispatch. And I believe, they are listening to us on this matter. And I hope that being a very important issue that has traveled over the years, I think over the last decade or so, as we have heard, I believe, particularly given the bipartisan kind of consensus that we are seeing around it, we are likely to get it done before this parliament stands dissolved.
You know what, Dr. Drummond, I have just been joined by somebody who can give us a clearer picture on this roadmap towards passage. I want to bring in the chair of the Constitutional Legal Affairs Committee in Parliament, Mr. Bernard Ahiafo, joins us right now. Mr. Ahiafo, thanks for the time here on PM Express. Great to have you join us. We are talking about...
Sir, and by way of correction, I'm not the chair of Constitutional Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. I'm rather the ranking member.
Oh, ranking, yes.
Of Constitutional Legal and Parliamentary
Constitutional
Affairs.
Legal ranking, yes. Great to have you. Great to have you, yes. And we're just having a conversation about the private members' motion, which has now been moved on, the private members' bill to amend the Constitution. The committee has recommended, as you know, the House to approve. Can you give us a sense of what you believe would happen now in terms of the timelines for the House to consider and possibly pass this?
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and a very good evening to your cherished listeners and viewers. As a matter of fact, this particular private members bill has been with us for some time. Gradually, the committee has worked on it, and the committee's report is laid in Parliament. Following the constitutional amendment, making it possible for Ghanaians to hold a dual citizenship, we need to take a look at the constitutional provision that tries to bar them from holding certain important positions in the country. So the committee, upon the introduction of the bill and being referred to the committee, we look at it and realize that we cannot give something to the people with the left hand and take it with the right hand. Once the Constitution guarantees that they can be a dual citizen, then it means once a citizen, any position that a citizen deserves to occupy, there should not be any limitation. Hence, the scope should be broadened to allow people with dual citizenship to hold certain positions, with the exception of the presidency.
Yeah, and that exception was created there, and you explain in your committee report.
So, regarding the timeline, as a matter of fact, this is a constitutional amendment. It is a non-entrenched provision. Therefore, the process of amendment will be as laid down in the Constitution. So there will be a second reading of the bill. And a second reading, the principle underpinning the bill will be debated. And when it moves from the second reading, it then goes to the consideration stage, and then it is passed.
And from what you know is happening around the committee and in Parliament, you're confident that this will be done before the House is dissolved?
Well, if it was at the committee level, I would have been speaking to the timeline as a ranking member. But once the bill is laid, and then the report of the committee is ready and laid in Parliament, it is left with the business committee and the leadership of Parliament to program it for second reading. And after the second reading, we'll then follow the procedure laid down.
We get a sense that there is bipartisan support for this among yourselves on the committee, but also generally among members of Parliament. Are we reading this right? Is that what you also get?
Well, you may be right, because at the committee level, we all agreed unanimously that this is what we should do. But at the plenary session, in fact, having spoken to some members from both sides, it is something that we all agree to do.
I saw in your report that there were still some members who had some concerns around loyalty and allegiance.
Yes. So we've dealt with that at the committee level. I think those concerns led to some exemptions in the bill currently. Some exemptions being proposed as an amendment of the committee to the bill for the consideration of the House.
Okay. Thanks for the clarity there, Bernard Ahiafo, as a ranking member of the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee. Professor Sari, so that's the ranking member that's giving us a sense of where this may go. You have been working at this pretty hard. Just a minute there, before we wrap up, what's your own expectation now that this is going to the plenary?
Well, I think I agree with the ranking member, and I've worked with the ranking member, and I want to thank him for buying me lunch whenever I was in Parliament. You know, he's very kind to me whenever I'm there, and he sees me, he feeds me. This is a constitutional amendment, so the Constitution is clear. There's going to be a second reading, and then a vote, and then a third reading and a vote. The legacy argument has already been made. And so the Speaker is aware of the importance of getting this done. The members of Parliament are aware of the importance of getting this done. There's time. I believe there's going to be the mid-year budget somewhere around this time. And that provides an opportunity for most of the members to be around. And that will be a good time to, it's not like a big legislation with so many clauses and sub-clauses. This basically says we've repealed this. So you either support it or you don't support it. So debate won't be protracted, and then they'll vote. I expect that the bill will be done before the House goes on recess this time, or in the event that it's not done, I think when they come back, they'll get it done before the 8th Parliament is closed.
Okay, Prof, thank you very much. Dr. Dramani, I'm grateful that you joined me. And Yusuf Hussaini too. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Page 20.